The cattle baron mocked a bride's wooden leg until she kicked his safe wide open. The laughter came first, sharp and cruel, cutting through the haze of tobacco smoke that hung in the Blackwater saloon. Clara Thorne sat alone at a corner table, her calloused fingers wrapped around a glass of untouched whiskey. She'd come here looking for work, any work, but found only mockery. Across the room, cattle baron Emmett Rutherford held court, his silver watch chain gleaming in the lamplight as he gestured toward Clara. "Look at her," he said, voice carrying deliberately. "Half a woman trying to be whole." His companions laughed on cue, the sound of money talking to money. Clara's jaw tightened. She'd worn her best dress, the faded blue one with only 3 visible mending spots. The wooden leg beneath it, carved pine wrapped in leather straps, remained hidden under the table. But everyone knew. In a town this small, everyone always knew. Rutherford wasn't finished. He stood, whiskey sloshing in his crystal tumbler. "Tell me, Mrs. Thorne, does your husband have to nail you to the floor to keep you from tipping over?" More laughter, louder now. Clara's cheeks burned, but she didn't look away. Wouldn't give him that satisfaction. Instead, she memorized his face, the way his mouth twisted when he smiled, how his eyes never quite joined the expression. She noted the safe key hanging from his vest pocket. And she waited. The town of Redemption sprawled across the dusty plains of Montana Territory, 1885. A single main street lined with false-fronted buildings, the church steeple on one end and the gallows on the other, God and judgment keeping their distance from each other. Clara limped down the boardwalk, the familiar thunk step rhythm drawing stares from women who quickly looked away. 3 months a widow, 6 years with a wooden leg. The accident at the sawmill had taken more than her limb, it had taken her place in this world. Women whispered she was lucky Thomas Thorne had married her anyway. Men wondered aloud what use she was now. Her small house sat on the edge of town, a weathered 2-room cabin with a sagging porch. Inside, everything had its place, arranged so she could reach it without stumbling. The leg chafed where it met flesh, but Clara had learned to live with pain. She removed it carefully each night, massaging the angry red skin beneath. That evening, she sat on her bed and stared at the wedding photograph on her nightstand. Thomas looked so young, his miner's hands scrubbed clean for the occasion. He died in the same shaft that had made Emmett Rutherford rich enough to mock strangers in saloons. The company had paid her nothing, just a pine box and empty condolences. "I'll manage," Clara whispered to the photograph. "I always do." The invitation arrived 3 days later, cream-colored paper with gold embossing. Clara turned it over in her hands, suspicious of its weight and texture. Mr. Emmett Rutherford requests the pleasure of your company at the annual Founders' Day Ball. Saturday next. Rutherford Estate. 8 o'clock. A handwritten note was scrawled across the bottom. Mrs. Thorne, I insist you attend. Consider it a personal favor. E.R. Clara's first instinct was to throw it in the fire. But something stopped her, the same stubborn pride that had kept her standing when the doctor took her leg, that had forced her to walk again when others said she couldn't. She placed the invitation on the table and opened the cedar chest at the foot of her bed. Inside lay her mother's things, untouched since her passing 5 years earlier. Beneath folded linens and a tarnished hairbrush, Clara found what she was looking for, a leather-bound diary with cracked spine and yellowed pages. Her mother had been a strong woman, raising Clara alone after her father disappeared into the gold fields. The diary told stories Clara had never heard, of courage and sacrifice, of quiet revenge against men who thought women were playthings. One passage caught her eye. A woman's strength isn't in what she shows the world, but in what she keeps hidden until the moment it's needed most. Clara closed the diary, decision made. She would attend Rutherford's ball, not because he commanded it, but because she needed to understand why he had. In the attic, she found her mother's old dress, midnight blue with silver threading. It would need altering, but the fabric was still good. Clara worked through the night, needle flashing in the lamplight, taking in the waist and letting out the hem to accommodate her uneven gait. The wooden leg posed a different challenge. She couldn't hide it in a ballroom, couldn't disguise the way she moved. For the first time in years, Clara considered what others saw when they looked at her. Not the woman she was, but the limb she wasn't. She unwrapped the leather straps and examined the crude pine replacement. An idea formed. If she couldn't hide it, perhaps she could transform it. Clara took up her carving tools, unused since the accident, and began to work. The Rutherford estate dominated the hillside above Redemption, a sprawling mansion of imported stone and local timber. Gas lamps lined the curved driveway where carriages deposited guests in fine clothes. Clara arrived on foot, her altered dress catching the evening light. her newly carved leg polished to a shine beneath it. She'd worked intricate patterns into the wood vines and flowers that spiraled up the visible portion below her hem. The leg was still wooden, still marked her as different, but now it was a deliberate statement rather than a shameful secret. Heads turned as she entered the grand foyer. Conversations paused. Clara felt the weight of stairs but kept her chin high, one hand gripping a carved walking stick for balance. Rutherford appeared at the top of the staircase, resplendent in a tailored suit. His eyes found Clara immediately, narrowing with something like surprise. He descended slowly, deliberately, each step an announcement of his importance. "Mrs. Thorne," he said, voice carrying across the now quiet room. "You accepted my invitation." "How unexpected." "You insisted, Mr. Rutherford," Clara replied, loud enough for others to hear. "And I was curious why a man of your standing would take notice of half a woman." A ripple of uncomfortable murmurs spread through the crowd. Rutherford's smile tightened, but he offered his arm with theatrical gallantry. "Allow me to introduce you to my guests. Many have expressed interest in meeting the widow Thorne." The evening unfolded like a staged play. Rutherford paraded Clara through the ballroom, introducing her with backhanded compliments. "Mrs. Thorne has overcome such terrible handicaps," he would say, or "Isn't it remarkable what determination can achieve, even in her condition?" Each introduction revealed more about Rutherford himself, how he controlled the town through an intricate web of debts and favors. The banker who'd foreclosed on 6 farms last spring laughed at his jokes. The judge who'd dismissed claims against the mine stood at his right hand. The mayor who'd granted Rutherford water rights to half the county beamed with practiced deference. Clara smiled and nodded, storing away each name, each connection. She noticed how the servants moved around Rutherford, eyes down, steps quick. Fear, not respect, governed his household. During a lull in the music, Clara excused herself, claiming fatigue. Instead of seeking a chair, she slipped down a quiet hallway, away from the festivities. The mansion was a maze of corridors and closed doors. She tried several, finding guest rooms and storage spaces. At the end of the hall stood a heavy oak door, different from the others. Clara tried the handle, locked. She was about to turn away when she heard voices approaching. Panicked, she pressed herself into an alcove, holding her breath as 2 men passed. "Rutherford's getting nervous about those papers," said one, his voice low. "Says the governor's asking questions about the mine collapse." "That's why tonight's so important," replied the other. "Once the judge signs off on the new claim, it won't matter what happened to those miners." The men continued down the hall, their conversation fading. Clara waited until their footsteps disappeared before emerging from her hiding place. She studied the locked door with new interest, then glanced down at her wooden leg. The mechanism holding it to her stump was simple but sturdy, metal pins and leather straps. Clara had designed it herself after the doctor's version had failed. With careful movements, she detached the wooden limb and examined its upper edge. The carved pine was 3 inches thick, hollowed slightly to reduce weight. Clara pressed against a hidden panel she'd built into the design, revealing a small compartment. From inside, she removed a thin metal tool, not quite a key, not quite a pick. Her father might have abandoned them, but he taught Clara things before he left. Useful things about locks and opportunities. Skills her mother had recorded in her diary with surprising detail. The lock clicked open after 30 seconds of careful manipulation. Clara reattached her leg, tucked the tool away, and slipped inside. The room was Rutherford's private study. A massive desk dominated the space, flanked by bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes that Clara suspected had never been read. A stone fireplace took up one wall, cold ashes in the grate. And there, opposite the desk, stood a safe. Not just any safe, a Brooker Model 7, the kind banks used, with 3-inch steel walls and a combination dial that required both numbers and directional turns. Clara moved carefully around the room, examining papers on the desk. Most were business documents, property deeds, mining claims, banknotes. But in a drawer, locked but easily picked, she found something unexpected, a file with her husband's name. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were reports from the mine foreman, dated weeks before the collapse that had killed Thomas and 11 other men. Each report detailed dangerous conditions, support beams cracking, water seepage, unstable shafts. Each report had been marked, reviewed, in Rutherford's flowing script. The final page was a cost analysis. Repairing the mine would cost $15,000. Potential compensation to families if a collapse occurred, $3,000 total, assuming no legal challenges. At the bottom, Rutherford had written, "Proceed as planned." Clara's vision blurred with tears of rage. Her husband hadn't died in an accident. He'd been sacrificed for profit, his life valued less than the cost of proper supports. And Rutherford had calculated it all with the same casual cruelty he'd used to mock her leg. She was still staring at the document when the study door opened. "Curious little bird, aren't you?" Rutherford stood in the doorway, a glass of champagne in one hand. "I wondered how long it would take you to find your way here." Clara didn't bother hiding the file. You knew the mine would collapse. Business involves risk assessment, Mrs. Thorne." He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "Your husband understood risk. He went down that shaft every day knowing it might be his last. He trusted you to keep him safe." Clara's voice broke. "All those men trusted you." Rutherford shrugged. "Trust is a luxury for those who can afford it." He gestured to the file. "What exactly do you plan to do with that information?" "The judge who would hear your case is currently enjoying my champagne. The sheriff owes me for his position. The newspaper editor's mortgage is held by my bank." He moved closer, towering over her. "You're nothing in this town. A crippled widow with no prospects and no power." Clara stood her ground. "My mother knew you, didn't she? Her name is in these files, too." Something flickered across Rutherford's face, surprise, quickly masked. "Rebecca Lawson was a maid in this house 20 years ago. She made accusations that couldn't be proven." "What kind of accusations?" "The kind women make when they want more than they deserve." His smile was cold. "She left with enough money to start a new life elsewhere. Apparently, she didn't use it wisely." The pieces connected in Clara's mind: her mother's diary entries about a powerful man, the money that had mysteriously appeared and then vanished, the reason they'd moved to Redemption despite having no connections here. "You're my father," Clara whispered, the revelation like ice in her veins. Rutherford laughed, the sound echoing in the quiet room. "Is that what you think? That I'm going to embrace you as my long-lost daughter? Play the repentant sinner?" He shook his head. "Your mother was one of many. And you." His eyes flicked to her wooden leg. "You're not exactly the legacy I'd choose to acknowledge." The words struck like physical blows, but Clara had endured worse pain. She straightened, gripping her walking stick tighter. "I don't want your acknowledgement. I want justice for my husband, for those miners, for my mother." "Justice?" Rutherford scoffed. "There's no justice for people like you. There's only survival if you're lucky." He gestured to the file. "Take it if you want. Show it around town. See who listens to the crippled daughter of a maid." Clara looked from the file to Rutherford's smug face, then to the safe behind him. "What's in there?" "More evidence of what you've done." "Nothing that concerns you." But his eyes betrayed him, darting quickly to the safe and back. "I think it does concern me." Clara took a step forward. "I think everything you've built has been on the backs of people like my husband. People like my mother. People like me." Rutherford's amusement faded. "You should leave, Mrs. Thorne. The invitation was a courtesy, a chance to see how the other half lives. Don't mistake it for something more." "A courtesy?" Clara laughed bitterly. "You mocked me in public. You deliberately humiliated me. And now I know why, because I remind you of your own failings." His face darkened. "Get out of my house. Not until I see what's in that safe." Clara moved toward it, but Rutherford blocked her path. "You've overstayed your welcome." He grabbed her arm, fingers digging into her flesh. Clara didn't resist. Instead, she shifted her weight, deliberately losing her balance. As she fell, she clutched at Rutherford, bringing him down with her. They landed hard on the wooden floor, Clara beneath him. "Help!" she cried out, voice carrying through the door. "Please, someone help me." Footsteps sounded in the hallway. The door burst open, revealing several guests and a servant. They found Rutherford sprawled atop Clara, her dress hiked up to reveal her wooden leg, tears streaming down her face. "He attacked me," she sobbed, the picture of feminine distress. "I just wanted to rest, and he followed me, forced himself on me." Rutherford scrambled to his feet, face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "She's lying. She broke into my study." But the scene spoke for itself: the powerful man, the vulnerable woman, the compromising position. Whispers spread through the gathering crowd. "Mr. Rutherford, surely not." "Per woman. Always did have unusual appetites." Clara allowed two women to help her up, playing the victim perfectly. In the confusion, she palmed the safe key from Rutherford's vest pocket, slipping it into her sleeve. "I should go," she said weakly. "I never should have come." The banker's wife stepped forward. "I'll take you home, dear. My carriage is outside." Rutherford watched helplessly as his carefully cultivated reputation unraveled. "This is absurd. She's manipulating you all." But the seed was planted. Even if they didn't fully believe Clara, doubt had crept in. And in a town built on appearances, doubt was poison. As she was led from the study, Clara glanced back at the safe. She had what she needed now. The rest would come later. The banker's wife was surprisingly kind, offering Clara a blanket in the carriage and promising to check on her the next day. Clara accepted the sympathy with downcast eyes and trembling hands, the perfect portrait of a woman wronged. But once alone in her cabin, she moved with purpose. The safe key felt heavy in her palm. By itself, it wasn't enough. The Brooker Model 7 required both key and combination. But Clara had one more card to play. From beneath a floorboard, she retrieved her mother's diary and turned to the final pages. There, in a coded script that had taken Clara weeks to decipher after her mother's death, was a series of numbers and directions. Left to 18. Right to 36. Left to 9. Clara had never understood what they meant. Now she did. She waited until dawn, when the town was still sleeping and the Rutherford estate would be quiet. The back entrance to the mansion was used by servants, unguarded and simple to access. Clara knew the rhythm of a grand house, how maids arrived early to light fires, how cooks began breakfast preparations, how the family slept late after entertaining. She slipped inside wearing plain clothes, her wooden leg disguised under a long skirt. With her hair tucked under a cap, she looked like any other servant going about morning duties. She kept her head down, moving purposefully toward the study. The room was empty, the fire cold. Clara locked the door behind her and moved directly to the safe. Her hand shook slightly as she inserted the key, then began turning the dial according to her mother's notes. Left to 18. Right to 36. Left to 9. The mechanism clicked. Clara held her breath and pulled the handle. The safe door swung open. Inside were stacks of cash, more money than Clara had ever seen. But it was the documents beneath that caught her attention. Land deeds with forged signatures. Letters detailing bribes to government officials. A ledger showing payments to witnesses who had testified against miners seeking compensation. And at the bottom, a bundle of letters tied with faded ribbon. Clara recognized her mother's handwriting on the envelopes, each one marked, "Return to sender." She was still reading when the study door rattled. Someone was trying to enter. Clara quickly gathered evidence, the ledger, the forged deeds, the most damning letters. She stuffed them into her dress, along with a stack of cash. Justice would require funds. The rattling stopped, followed by the sound of keys. Clara had seconds, not minutes. She looked around desperately, then down at her wooden leg. With quick movements, she detached it again, holding it like a club. The door opened. Rutherford stood there, unshaven and wild-eyed, a pistol in his hand. He took in the scene, Clara standing on one leg, the open safe, the scattered papers. "You," he snarled, raising the gun. "I knew you'd come back." Clara didn't hesitate. She swung her wooden leg in a wide arc, the solid pine connecting with Rutherford's wrist. The gun clattered to the floor. Before he could recover, Clara struck again, this time at his knee. He held in pain, crumpling. "That's for my husband," she said, voice steady. And this, she kicked the safe door wider with her remaining foot, exposing its emptied contents to the gathering household staff. "This is for my mother." Rutherford lunged for her, but Clara was ready. She brought the wooden leg down one final time, connecting with his temple. He collapsed, unconscious. Clara reattached her leg as servants stared in shock. She gathered the remaining evidence, including her mother's returned letters, and addressed the wide-eyed staff. "Your employer has been stealing from this town for years. These papers prove it." She held up the ledger. "Including how he cheated many of you out of your wages." Murmurs spread through the growing crowd. Clara continued, "I'm taking these to the governor's office in Helena. Mr. Rutherford won't be able to bury the truth this time." A young maid stepped forward. "He'll come after you. Let him try." Clara straightened, standing tall despite her uneven gait. "I'm not hiding anymore." 3 months later, Clara stood at her mother's grave, the autumn wind rustling through prairie grass. She placed fresh flowers against the simple stone, then sat on the nearby bench. "It's done," she said quietly. "Rutherford's been charged. The mine's been sold to the miners' cooperative." She smiled slightly. Thomas would have liked that. The town of Redemption had changed. With Rutherford's empire crumbling, others had stepped forward, good people who'd been silenced by fear or debt. Clara had used some of the safe money to establish a fund for injured workers and widows. The rest she'd returned to those Rutherford had stolen from. She'd kept nothing for herself except her mother's letters, desperate pleas to a man who had abandoned his responsibilities. Clara had finally read them all, finding in them not just pain but strength. Her mother had never stopped fighting, never stopped believing in justice. From her bag, Clara removed a small object, a carved wooden rose, polished to a warm glow. She'd made it from a piece of her old leg, which she'd replaced with a better designed version. The new one didn't announce itself so loudly when she walked. But Clara no longer cared who noticed. She placed the rose at the base of the headstone. "You were right," she whispered. "A woman's strength isn't in what she shows the world, but in what she keeps hidden until it's needed most." Standing, Clara took one last look at the grave, then turned toward town. Her uneven footsteps made a rhythm against the hard-packed earth, not the sound of something broken, but the sound of someone who had learned to walk her own path, whatever obstacles lay in her way. Total_char_count, 26,483.